Right.
I did. That's all I've done.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the extraordinary Infrastructure Services Committee, today, 14th February. We're here to go over the draft submission for the Three Waters bills, 2 and 3. Right, so we'll start. Erin, do you want to speak first?
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, the paper before you today is talking about a potential submission that we would look to make to the Three Waters National Transition Unit's draft legislation in Parliament at the moment around next steps for water reform. It covers the Water Services Legislation Bill and the Water Services Economic Efficiency and Consumer Protection Bill. These are both currently out for consultation, and we would propose that Invercargill City Council make a submission with regard to that draft legislation. We currently have drafted a piece of feedback to that, and we put that in front of Council today. The key pieces that I would like to draw your attention to some of the concerns that we have around implications for Invercargill City Council to have to continue to be involved in on-charging for the services provided by the new Three Waters entities. At the moment, we could be required to provide that service to the new entities through to 2029. We have to enter into an agreement with the new entities around the terms and conditions that would be on. But essentially, if we can't come to an agreement in that respect, then an agreement will essentially be determined by the Minister. ICC staff feels that this compels us to essentially have to provide that charging, and that's something that we don't agree with. These are no longer assets that we are responsible for. We don't think we should be compelled to continue to be involved in the charging of those, particularly given the confusion that's likely to create with customers around who is responsible for those assets going forward. The other items that I'd like to draw your attention to is the implication in the draft legislation that the new entity wouldn't pay rates for its pipe network in council roads. This would be inconsistent with other utility providers and inconsistent actually with what happens for ICC's network at the moment. The Three Waters team is actually rated by the broader council business in that respect. That's a key revenue for council going forward, and if we didn't have that revenue, would provide a significant gap for us to fund in the rates space. We're also concerned about the process for what's called the allocation schedule, which deals with which assets are handed across and the debt that is covered by the entity back to Invercargill City Council to take the Three Waters debt off our books. At the moment, they essentially will receive an allocation of that debt. If we don't agree with it, there appears to be little right of reply for ICC, and again, those determinations going through the Minister. We absolutely don't agree with that position, and there needs to be a right of reply and negotiation in that respect. And the final one is around stormwater. Those who have been looking closely at the Three Waters reforms will understand that it's been a controversial area as to whether or not stormwater goes across as part of the Three Waters entities. The key issue there is at the moment it is intending to transfer in part, but not in full. It's a little bit unclear by the draft legislation which parts would stay with councils. We don't think it's sufficiently clear. And there's a little bit of a feeling that the reticulated network in urban areas would go across, and that there's a number of pieces that are what we'd almost call the rats and mice pieces that are a little bit difficult and intangible to get a hand on, but take up a significant amount of our time, that would stay with councils. Our concern is that we wouldn't have the staff and the expertise post-reform to be dealing with that, so we would like to see it being clear one way or the other that stormwater, if it's goes across as a whole responsibility area. We accept that transport-related stormwater, curbs and channels, etc., would stay with us, and that private drainage, as regulated under the building code, would stay with us, but beyond that, we would like to see, we're suggesting that we'd like to see that go across as a whole. Those are the key points I wanted to draw your attention to. The submissions are due in on the 17th, this Friday. This will obviously have to go through council to be endorsed, so we would propose that we would provide the submission on Friday, noting that a final endorsement would be required by council at the next council meeting, and then we'd advise them once that was endorsed.
Thank you, Erin. So my apologies, just a bit of housekeeping. Even though we've had 2 meetings already, I must do the apologies for this meeting. And so the apology we have is Councillor Campbell. So moved. Seconded. Thank you very much. I'll put that. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against, that is carried. Right. Okay. Before I open the floor up, I'll get Mayor Clark just to say a couple of words, since he will be in recommendation 3 does or does not wish to speak. I hear that he does wish to speak to the Select Committee. Nobby, would you like to just open up the discussions first?
Yeah, sure. So 2 or 3 things. The report is excellent to Erin and whoever else, probably Michael and others that had some input into that. I think there are still some wider issues, but I don't want to go back to a redraft given the time we've got. Certainly there's some unease, I think, about how they'll operate in the first 12 months and where some of their CAPEX funding or capital funding will come from, and what the risks of that are, and certainly around the issues that you talked about the geographical averaging, how that impacts with a council that already has water meters. And so there's a lot of uncertainty around this proposal, and we can't just sit here and think that a national coalition government will get rid of all of it. So we need to continue to lobby for the things that clearly aren't right. But the report covers most of what I would suggest. And certainly we should have a voice at the table. And certainly we should stand alone on our submission, not get caught up in any joint submission elsewhere. I found it quite farcical last time Rangi and I went to the Select Committee in Dunedin and spoke that we had some colleagues from the Otago area, who'd been adamant that they were in favour of this reform all the way through. We got quite a flogging for being outside their support area, and I personally got some as well, only to find that when we got to the Select Committee they were all opposed to it because it was election time. I just thought that was quite farcical. So it's very much that we should stand alone and make our own submission, and I'd be in favour of going to it. If it's in Dunedin, that would be great, but if not, then we go wherever we need to go.
Okay, thanks for that. Just to clear up the submission, are we not doing a joint?
So I've just had clarification from my colleagues in Central Otago today who were coordinating a joint submission. Their intention is not to do a joint submission of councils. Their intention is to do a submission on behalf of staff at this point in time, only to draw out those 5 or 6 key issues that everybody agrees on. So that's something that I'm happy to take some further discussion on. It would be nothing that is in opposition to what we have put forward. Just attempting to put further strength to those 5 or 6 key issues.
Yeah, and just in response to that, Chair, for those that attended the post-Waitangi Day celebration, that Claire and I were both there, getting a joint submission up with the Otago Southland Network at the moment, the Zone 6, is problematic. It was very problematic on Dunedin Hospital, and it has been on other issues as well. I think we need to be absolutely sure that if we're getting staff to give some input to a submission, what does that tell MPs? That we've got a separate submission from staff as opposed to those that govern the councils, even if they're in agreement.
I guess what I'd be saying is the reason it would be a separate staff submission is simply that ability to try to coordinate multiple councils all on such a tight time frame is just logistically very difficult to achieve. So
bear with me again as I just tease this out. So I'd hate to think that that's getting around the current discomfort we have in our Otago Southland network at the mayoral level. And that's driven in part because we have quite unique needs. what we need in Invercargill for Three Waters is totally different to Central Otago and other areas. So, and over and above that, we've got Ngāi taking a position as well. So I'm not sure that we should be doing a staff one as well. It's a little bit like if I wanted to get a position on what ILT thought about development of the city, I'd approach the chair of the board for that position. I wouldn't then go in and ask for some feedback from the chief executive as well.
So apologies, I'd had some different feedback when we held a workshop on the matter around the desire to put forward a joint submission. So that's what I've based going ahead on. If it is a different decision of council today, then we can look to amend that.
I guess what I'm leading to, Chair, through you, is that while we might get all our concerns bundled up with that, we may be party to concerns that are not ours. And that just widens the debate away from where we've been.
I thought we were neutral on that joint commission because I was definitely against it for the very reasons the Mayor has mentioned.
Councillors and Mr Mayor, you may recall that at the first round of submissions there was a executive director for Otago Southland Chief Executives on Three Waters, and she presented a submission and her technical knowledge was valued in the sense that she had previously been the GM of infrastructure at Central Otago District. This legislation has a significant impact on staff. And it has a significant impact on staff who may transfer, and it also has a significant impact on staff who may not transfer, such as the customer services staff, where the legislation proposes that we may well be continuing to front that until July 2029. It's Julie's work from the officials or the officers' perspective that is proposed in this. It is not in a political sense of the impact of it, which I would say I completely understand is the purview of councils speaking on behalf of their communities. This is from the purview of chief executives talking about the arrangements, many of which, quite frankly, have been delegated to officials in government when one looks at the legislation. And I refer specifically to the issue of agreeing the level of debt. That is delegated to the Secretary for the Department of Internal Affairs rather than to the Minister. So these are the sorts of details that I would anticipate Julie would also be able to answer if she was presenting to the Select Committee.
You happy with that, Nobby?
No, not really. No, I think that if we're going to make one submission on behalf of us, on behalf of this council, we should be canvassing things that Claire's just raised. So we've got issues around whether all our water engineers want to transfer across the new organisation, and some may not. Some may go to the private sector. Or if we've got issues around, I guess, non-technical staffing issues, then we should signal that in our report. We should, the council should. I think once you start having multiple reports, the picture gets muddied, and we saw that recently with the Dunedin Hospital situation. It was an absolute mess.
So is that at all possible to do the staffing
No,
queries in this?
no,
Not at all.
fine. I'm sorry, councillors. The timing of this is, I think the word I would use is fatiguing. And I don't wish to say it's deliberate, but by golly, over the Christmas period, the Mayor's positive comments about the submission are very valued in the sense that Erin has done 95% of this work on her own at the last minute. To now ask that further work be done to include it with your other priorities is actually pushing staff beyond a reasonableness. We just won't submit.
Just a final clarification on that, Chair, if you don't mind. I wasn't suggesting we change this report at all. What I'm saying is, if the chief executive group that want to, across the Otago Southland region, put in an alternative, I think that's counter. And secondly, if there are issues in there around staffing that we haven't got in our report at this stage, then they are not significant in the overall scheme of things.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I've got a list here. No, I'll just get this sorted, and then I'm going to open the floor. Okay. Right. Okay. We'll leave that where it is now. I've got Rhea first.
So I just wanted to make a comment from having sat on select committees that when we do have the chief executive come through with a submission on behalf of all council, it's usually collectively done as that council, so that when you're coming through your issues, you outline your most important issues to that legislation. But I have to say I've never seen and I understand what you're saying, Claire, I've never seen a staff network submit in that same district or territorial authority. It would look like there is not a one voice speaks for all, and it would do us a disservice if that was the movement forward.
Mr. Chair, I would completely agree with the councillor. In this particular instance, the government is funding work being done by regions, by this executive director. There's actually a bit of different play for this legislation than there typically is for other policy differences. I appreciate council's sense, and we'll leave it at that.
Okay, is that Rhea, you right?
Yep, no, I totally understand that, and I do get with the fatigueness, but you know, legislation like this, it is called for that we do have to work that extra mile to get what we want ahead of the line or across the line. So totally accept that remark too.
Okay, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 points on the matter. One, in complete agreement with Councillor Bond. This isn't something that council does non-frequently. We've definitely had submissions in the past where we've put forward a view from our council, but we also know that our team members have been working in the background forming their own submission that gives weight regionally to whatever it is that we're putting forward for us. My other point is that I believe our officer was extremely clear that none of what the staff report would be put forward as is in opposition to what we have. And I think that's really key, excuse me, that they're not going out and completely changing their opinion or putting forward things that we don't already agree with. We can trust in the fact that our staff are putting forward a submission on their own, off their own back, but knowing that it's not in opposition to what we've put forward ourselves.
I'll just wait, Nobby. Leslie.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I've got a slightly different view as someone who's heard a lot of submissions. In my opinion, who better than staff to draw out the staffing implications at a select committee of the particular issues that can't be drawn out in such a fulsome way. Who better than a staff submission to present the reality that councils will not have the experts remaining to have bits and pieces of the stormwater left in council's hands, etc. Who better than a staff person presenting to say there will be an exodus of the experts currently employed by councils elsewhere? That statement is far more powerful from the staff whose livelihood is at stake and who will move where the jobs are than it is from a council who is presenting a number of other very important council issues. I think it's a good, I also agree it's a good submission. The only thing I'd change with it is on the suggestion that we speak, I would actually suggest that last, the council requests the opportunity to make an oral submission to the committee should include the words preferably at a South Island venue. I think it is always worth making that point with a council submission that we would like it heard outside Wellington, especially on a bill of this seriousness. Don't just leave it as we want to make an oral submission, actually say we want it to be, if you want to say in Invercargill or Dunedin, say that, but I just think don't just leave it as a submission where we have to go to Wellington on a bill of this sort of substance. But on the other issue, I just think that on the particular issues of the effect this will have staffing wise, there is no better presenter than staff who are actually living with the reality day to day. It's an issue that'll be lost in our general submission on the other important issues we want to emphasise as a council that the staff can actually speak to.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Just before I go to Nobby, can I ask you, will the group of staff have a designated speaker? Verbal, they going oral at the select committee?
The intention would be that if they speak to it, that it would be Julie Muir who heads up that Otago collaboration at Otago Southland collaboration at a staff level.
And she's based where?
Central Otago, in Alexandra.
Okay. Nobby.
So just working through the issues that have been raised, I guess. I don't see how we can control the Otago Southland voice. While we might have 10 issues raised on the staffing issue, for argument's sake, we might not be in opposition to 5 of them, but it's a little bit like you saying, well, we're going to mandate today that a chief executive or a staff group can go away and make a submission, which we actually don't get to see. It's got to be in by Friday, and so I'm nervous about that, and I think it's our role as government to cover staff-related issues. If we don't have this in the report that we've got at the moment, and we don't have the time to amend it, which is what the chief executive says, then the staff issue's lost. If I do an oral presentation, I will address that anyway, because I addressed it last time we went to Dunedin, Rangi was there, about the issue that they cannot assume, which they currently do, that they're just going to grab all the water engineers from every council. That's not going to happen. Some people will not want to transfer across. Some will want to go across to the downers and others that are going to be in this field as well. So they've been warned about that before. Yeah, and I just said it sets a terrible precedent when we start having a voice from council, and then we have the chief executives or the staff group off having their own voice. What message does that give to MPs?
Well,
We should be representing the staff.
Yeah.
What I would say is the key benefit that I see behind it is that what we've found with the National Transition Unit is that where Otago Southland councils who at an operational working level work together quite well, when we're able to use a collective voice in pushing back, we've found that that's had a much better effect than us trying to push back individually. The intention of this wasn't to put forward anything that was contrary to any of our councils or that would cause any controversy with any of our councils, but to attempt to give greater weight through a united voice on those issues that we were particularly keen and passionate about. That's all we were attempting to achieve.
When would we be able to get a glimpse of the submission? Obviously, it's we're not going to interfere with it. But when do we...
I hear an instruction that we don't do it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I hear an instruction that we don't do it. So,
I don't hear that.
That would be my preference, Chair, if I get an
That
Uh,
would
opportunity.
be my preference.
Well,
It needs to be a motion.
There needs to be a
Yeah,
motion.
yeah. I think we're on. This is new information. I did not.
It is.
I did not know.
I mean,
the separate submission.
Chair, we've been asked to consider our submission,
Yeah.
but in the background, unbeknown, certainly to me anyway, that we've got a chief executive / staff group also doing a submission, which we don't get to see either.
Sorry, in fairness, when we workshopped this, we did discuss the fact that there was this separate submission.
Yep.
What wasn't discussed at the time was the exact process around how it would go up, and I did advise that I would come and talk further around that once I had the detail. So that's the detail that we're bringing today.
So my understanding of that workshop was that the chief executives or the staff group, whichever you want to call it, would come back to us with the issues that they had from a staffing perspective, which I thought was great. I mean, they're cold face, so they know. And that if there was anything significant, we would have that in our report. And it now seems as though we've got 2 separate reports.
Simply
And
from a timing perspective.
As Rhea just said, it's never happened before at council level. I don't see the benefit. While you might well negotiate with the National Transition Unit, you know how this works. The National Transition Unit are not the MPs, who are a coalition right across Parliament. And that's at a different level altogether.
Yeah.
We're not negotiating with the DIA.
Okay. Nobby, I'm going to move on to keep this moving. Trish and then Rhea.
Seems to me that we're looking at a governance and an operational thing. Now, you will have your submission planned already, have you?
So I'm not writing it. I provided feedback into Julie Muir at Central Otago of our key issues. She's drafting it. I'm expected to have the draft tomorrow. The reason that it's coming through so late was that obviously all of the councils had to go away as staff and come up with their submissions and figure out what was important to them before a joint one could be prepared.
What I'm understanding then is that you as a group, as a staff group, have developed what you see are the issues.
Mm-hmm.
The perception that I would see is that if Invercargill City Council deliver a submission by themselves, but the staff collectively do it with others, it looks like a breakdown. And I believe that we could have the submission with an operational piece added to it.
No, we've already been told, sorry, that there's no time to do that.
No, they can't spend any more time.
But haven't you got it ready?
No, so I've given some high level feedback on it. It's now gone off to somebody else to finalise and write the submission. I'll be honest, I've now turned my attention to 12:25 for the remainder of the week.
I just see that it doesn't look good.
Ria.
I make an observation. What this tells me is that our staff and CEO really care about what's going to happen in their future under this legislation. What I want to hand out and reach out and say to you is, so am I as a citizen of the city, and our ratepayers are also going to be affected. I'm more for that we have to have an absolute strong submission that includes your voices of how it's going to affect our engineers or our team, or whether we shrink in employment or not. The knowledge that is gained through submitting to legislative and bills is actually through your employment. And that partially is to make sure that as a council and councillors that we're actually receiving that information from our advisors, quite rightly as you said, other advisors and officials deal with things, but in the role that I don't mean any disrespect, our staff here are employed to is help us with this legislation. So when we send two bits of submissions coming forward, that one's very strong from council and one's very strong from an employment perspective and how that team's affected, it's almost sending a mixed message and undermining the bigger need, which is actually a conjoined front for our city, our ratepayers, our workers, everyone in this building.
Right, Nigel. No? I thought you had your hand up.
I was just very excited about being involved in okay. Which she has a hell of a lot of work to do Thursday morning.
That's pressurised.
Look, this is to me as chair. Like I'm a bit blindsided because I remember the workshop and we talked about a joint submission, but I was totally under the belief it was going to be at a joint council level like we are here. Okay, there was no indication it was going to be a second submission at another level. Now, I'm aware that Central CODC has completely different views to this council on the Three Waters, and they're entitled to. And I just, is that going to be available to us tomorrow? This draft to look at, this staff one.
No, so we don't have another committee meeting ahead of when the submission would be due. So there wouldn't be an opportunity to review it.
My advice?
Just leave it.
Just leave it.
No, well, it's still going to be submitted. It's going to have every council if we. I mean,
And Invercargill won't be
on it.
That's the instruction I've heard, and we accept that.
So it'll be all of region except for us.
no, but this is completely out of agenda. It's totally off scope, and I'm not happy with it at all. Right, I'm going to keep going. Leslie, then Noe.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just think that to not have the Invercargill staff involved in a technical submission that would be of some use for the one chance we have to submit on these bills would be a major disservice. Yeah. We have the assurance that this submission would be technical and not in any way at variance with the more general submission we are putting in as a council. I can see no reason why we would not take the chance to be part of a good technical submission on an issue that we all know is highly technical and is about the movement of water engineers around the country, where they'll move to, how it might affect and mean that various councils are abandoned and not left with the staff that we would expect to have. It just seems to me that this is the only chance we have to be part of a good technical submission as well as a very good general submission. I just can't see why it would be any disservice to the ratepayers of Invercargill to have us as part of a technical submission that might actually drive some points home that are pretty important in this whole issue of these two bills.
Okay, before I carry on, I'm going to actually state that this is a technical submission. If you read the 54 paragraphs, there's a lot of technical detail about all sorts of matters concerning Three Waters, and I guess as chair, I can't see why this is not an addition to the one we're submitting, and it would have been added on to all of the council's submissions. Instead of 54 paragraphs, it might be
So,
77.
Chair, my understanding is that we had a discussion a little bit earlier around where we're at compared to some of our other council counterparts. There's a significant amount on people's agendas at the moment, and for the most part, my understanding is that the other councils aren't as far progressed with their submissions as what we are. So it simply wasn't a position to have a joint submission ready at this time. It is something that will be, going down to the wire in terms of timing. As the Chief Executive's advised, though, we've taken on board the feedback. We'll simply advise that it's not something that ICC wishes to progress with at this time.
Well, this is only, we've had some comments made, but there's no formal decision being made. We are just thrashing it out and getting it out in the open and trying to understand it. I don't think the feedback is anyway. No way would I interpret we want it gone or we want it to stay. We're just trying to understand it.
As I'm sure you can understand, if there were some councils that had had council approval of a submission and some that hadn't had a chance to do that yet, that provides some difficulty in terms of the submission. That's the main reasoning behind having it going up as a staff submission, because not all councils have had an opportunity to meet and have subcommittees that meet before the end of the month. So again, as I say, we're really just trying to reiterate those key points that we've already put forward in our submission, and draw those out a little bit more in a joint submission, saying that these are the key things that all of the councils really want to stress. But again, the practicality of being able to do that at an officer level. But if the feedback is that we are concerned about the perception that provides, then we're happy to take on board that feedback and not create that issue.
Right, look, I'm going to end just the discussion on that very subject at the moment till the end, and if need be, we can add it as another recommendation, because I think it's distracting us from the current submission. So I'm going to keep moving on, and Grant.
No, I was going to speak to that. So.
Okay, we'll just look. I think we need to park that up, and if it's if staff are suggesting it's they're going to withdraw it, and we're just trying to understand it, I think we'll just park it until we come to the end of discussion around the 54 paragraphs we've got. So continuing there, look, I've got a question around it's around funding for the whole for this whole project, and it really scares me. I went on the LGFA website today, and they disclose how much they currently loan to all the councils in New Zealand, and that is $14 billion at the moment, and assume perhaps half of that is Three Waters related, probably less, but we'll go half, $7 billion. Now that's for Three Waters activities. Now that is being serviced at the moment by New Zealand, all of New Zealand. The proposal under the Three Waters scheme is to increase that debt to $180 billion, 25 times. Now, if you've got a country servicing with the rates we're paying now, $7 billion, how can you possibly service $180 billion and pay what they claim under efficiencies and everything, something equitable? The maths doesn't work for me. So I'm going to pass over to Michael to see if he might shed any light on something like that. And this is assuming that the entities can borrow at a rate very close to LGFA.
Thank you, Chair, for that. Looking at the debt, I would have to say you need to take into account all of the local authority debt that's there as well in relation to that servicing, because we're servicing a portion of debt as well. So that the figure first stated gives you one number, but there's also all the local entity debt as well combined that's being serviced via rates. So you've got tax and rates paying for debt at the moment. Having said that, there is a significant increase in the debt to be serviced, and there will be some increase in one of those particular areas, either through tax or rates, to service that debt. That is a given. If you increase the debt, you need to increase the servicing charge somewhere. That is the principle that they've provided. That'll be shared across all of the users of the three waters through the four entities. Other than that, I can't comment any further, because it'll be the finances within the entities that will provide that advice and recommendation coming back.
So what I'm getting at is we've had no real indication of the reality that sits in front of us of what's going to happen, because say that 7 billion is actually 14 billion, regardless, it's still 180 billion is 10 times. Yeah, so I'm really struggling here. But it's not in our submission questioning this abyss we're heading into, but I guess we just sit back.
I think, Chair, we did draw a similar point out during our submission to the first piece of legislation, to the Water Services Entity Bill, around our concerns around how the debt figures stacked up and the impact for Invercargill City. So that was something that we did put forward as part of our first submission.
Right, no, that's fine. I appreciate that, Michael. Thanks. Okay, any further comments regarding our submission? No? Okay, well, I'm going to get back to whether we're happy to let the staff put in the submission. I mean, I can't, the submission is going ahead. The fact that if Invercargill doesn't put its name on it, it still goes forward, and it creates something else. Ria.
So I'm going to apologise. I was a bit slow to react before you asked if there was any more comments on the submission. When I'm reading through this, and I had a look through it, there's some key concerns in through this submission, which I think one of them I looked at was 0.5 of the council's key concerns. And throughout the submission, we've referred to quite a few other organisations like LGNZ, which is fine, but there seems to be no actual data information put in here to show the effects and adverse effects of what this legislation will do to us down here. There's no information in terms of like revenue or costs impacts on us either, and those things should be in there.
What we have got, I'll step in here, because back in 2021 or 20, we had to submit the first one, and that was a detailed financial one that showed where we would be in 2050, etc., and that we would be far worse off, and it explained why.
Okay, so
and it mentions in here that letter.
Sure. So some of those people sitting in those chairs now today wouldn't have been there when we put the submission through.
Right.
So I guess what I'm saying is that we need to make sure that we are consistent with following up that absolute risk factor to us, and a set of eyes looking at those figures will go to those figures before they go to the words and the statements.
So you're saying there would be attachments?
Sorry.
Mr. Chair, the way in which that could be dealt with would be it has been referred to in the 54 paragraphs, as the Chair keeps referring to. We could actually attach it.
Yes.
And that would answer that issue.
Brilliant.
Yeah, refer appendix.
We provided
Yeah,
it.
yeah, that's brilliant.
No, because that first letter, when we were asked to either opt in or opt out, was very specific.
Mm.
There was no ambiguity there whatsoever. Right. We're getting back to now the point about the staff submission, the combined council staff submission. And we're talking, just to get it clear, the councils involved are the three from down here, Dunedin, Clutha, CODC, Queenstown, any further north?
Waitaki.
Waitaki. Okay. Well, the only concern for me is the fact that
won't be Queenstown.
won't be Queenstown.
Well, they're a metro, aren't they? Would they be involved?
Yes, absolutely.
You're talking about something else.
Yeah, it's just something I haven't seen, you know, and it, you know, I've got full faith that it represents, you know, a different view, and the content would be only about the impact on staff. Is that right?
No, it is to draw weight to the key pieces of that we've wanted to focus on, things like the debt allocation schedule. It does go into a little bit more detail around that, but those key principles: why would the entity not pay rates? Why would the entity not take the whole stormwater piece? I think the other thing to keep in context is that there are some councils who have perhaps not had the staff resource to throw at unpicking this legislation and preparing a submission in their own right. This is their opportunity to collaborate with other councils and all go, yes, we agree that that's not right either, we'd like to do a joint submission. It's a little bit of that pooling the resources that we have available to try to get those key points that we all agree on across. But again, if that's causing some concerns and some uncertainty for people, then that's fine. I guess there's a little bit, sometimes a little bit of a different concerns at a political level than perhaps what there are at a staff level.
Look, I think I'm gonna lead off as chair. I'm going to give full trust that the staff one will be a specific nature and support what we're putting in. But I will add it to actually, for me to vote on this, I'm going to have to, put a second fourth recommendation up there. Yeah. Right. So can someone give some wording, please, to a recommendation that just council endorses the combined staff submission? Or is it for zone 6 or for anything? Or any more comments on the staff submission? Anyone want to speak? Trish?
Sorry. I just want to know what you're going to do tomorrow if the joint submission comes back and it really doesn't reflect what Invercargill Council operational team means.
Given where other councils are at with their submissions and the fact that the person pulling it together has just come back off leave, it will very strongly represent the views of DCC and ICC as being the only two who have actually done their submissions at this stage.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, any further comments? We're just getting...
Anywhere where there was a point of contention where everybody didn't agree, we'd simply remove that point.
So just to clarify through you, Chair, when it comes back, it won't involve Erin in the sense of any additional work. I need to be very clear. Is that correct?
Are you speaking...
Not until the end of this week.
No, as of tomorrow.
As of Friday.
No, I just need to be clear. Is that correct?
She'll need to read it.
No, well, actually, the Three Waters thing is the highest priority thing at the moment for council.
There will be a small amount of work, Nigel, that I'll be able to manage within my 1225 obligations.
I'm more concerned for you and not 1225.
Right. Yes, Nobby.
Look, I'm still lost on this process. We've got an undetermined, indeterminate, report coming. We don't know who it's coming from. Maybe driven by us in Dunedin, maybe not. It might have parts that we're not happy with, and it'll be not seen by any council around this table, I suspect. And then we'll put our names to it. I'm not going to be party to that, but I would also say that it's really interesting that Aaron quoted more technical detail than what we've currently got into our report. Now, what does that tell MPs? If we put in some very overarching statements around some things, around debt and other things, and then we get a more technical report that comes from a group of staff, of which only 2 councils are really contributing to it. I mean, I just don't get that. And then we don't even get to see what we committed to.
So just get my head around it. When they
I'm
receive it,
lost.
as each council
Really?
going to attach the staff report to the report that we've got here. So we send that into Dunedin sends their report plus the staff report. So they effectively get
An appendix.
Or is it just come in from out of the blue from staff?
It's submitted through a separate stream. There'd be two separate submissions going up, one from Invercargill City Council, one from each and every other council that wants to submit in its own right, and one that is going through from the coordinator on behalf of Otago Southland, who would then submit that on behalf of the chief executives.
Through you, Chair. So, interesting around this table, who knows who that person is going to present at the submission select committee on behalf of the staff. Anybody know who that person is? You can see the heads shaking for yourself. This is a governance issue that's really important on Three Waters. Probably the biggest issue we're going to face in this term, as it was last term. To give that authority away and to say that we need to have a staff voice when we should be covering all the key points that the staff have right here and now. And if we don't have time to amend the report, then the report goes, as far as I'm concerned. I wouldn't attach anything from other councils because I've seen recently what happened on the health issue that we had at Dunedin Hospital. It was a shambles. And if you want to get the minister or MP's attention, you'd be very clear that you don't give a mixed message from different sources. Because it begs the question, why would we need staff to submit on this bill if we've done a good job ourselves?
Well, it tells them that your council's weak.
Correct.
No,
Sorry,
sorry,
but-
can I just add?
But that's
what-
from experience sitting there.
What it
That's
tells me
them.
is that we're actually trying to plug a gap for those councils who haven't had the resource to submit in their own right.
Well, all I'd
If,
say-
if we're not,
Yeah,
if we're
all
not
I'd say to that,
concerned
Chair,
about putting,
is
all
it's
we're
not-
trying to do is put extra weight to our own views. But we're quite happy if we're saying that to pull it. It's not a
And
problem.
my view on that is our job is to advocate for our ratepayers. If there is some joint capacity, that certainly adds weight, but we don't even know what the other councils are submitting on, other than probably what's happening in Dunedin. And Aaron has just said the other councils aren't up to speed. The deadline is this Friday. And the other issue for me is, which is what Nigel raised, was that we've got a massive amount of paperwork on Project 1225 that Aaron has to get her eyes across in the next 3 or 4 days. So it's a nonsense to be going off and doing another report. It really is. So, but
Okay.
I'll vote accordingly.
Right, any further discussion? Right, we've got...
Could I recommend, Chair, that we do each of the 4 recommendations separately?
I'm definitely doing that.
Thank you.
So we'll start with recommendation 5. Oh, no. 4.
Can we take 1, 2, and 3 together?
We'll do 1, 2, 3 together.
So do we have a mover and a second?
So
Yes.
We'll need to clarify 3.
yeah. So who's
Okay, so 3, I'm going to put that we do. Actually, can we change that to does?
So sorry, do we have a mover and a second?
No, not yet. I was going to change that.
I understand that's for the mover to do.
Yeah.
Mr.
So I'll
Chair,
move 1, 2, and 3 with does. In
Second.
Yep. Thank you, and seconded the mayor. Okay, so that is does speak.
Can I just add that I would like the addition of preferably in the South Island to be part of the submission.
Oh, yeah, convenient geographical location or something like that. Yeah.
Any words that
brackets,
convey
preferably in the South Island.
in the South Island.
Yeah. Well, we know it can't be.
we can invite them
And
to
We'll,
come
we'll
here.
add that to the submission.
Yeah.
No, sorry, that's under 3.
Number 3.
When was the last time we were in
No,
Hokitika?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Soper wanted the submission change to say that.
It doesn't have to
Oh,
change
yes.
it doesn't have to change the recommendation.
Oh.
I'm just saying this point before.
Oh,
The
okay.
location.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
just
That's,
point out.
we heard you, and we will ensure that that addition is made. Don't worry about any.
Okay, that
As
is
with attaching our previous
paragraph
submissions.
55. Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, we've had it moved and seconded for 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to put that motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? They are carried. Now we'll move to recommendation 4, that the committee acknowledges that an Otago Southland submission has been prepared by the Regional Three Waters Director and confirms his submission should include Invercargill City Council.
Could we note staff submission?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Otago Southland staff submission.
Okay, so
Move that way.
you're moving it.
Move that way.
Moved for 4, seconded Barry. We're going to put the motion for number 4. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Aye. Keep hands up or?
Yeah, I'm against. Yeah.
So what are we? 1, 2.
Seven. It's lost.
7 again.
Yeah, it's lost. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
Oh,
10,
did-
11, 12, 13 people present.
7 against.
7 against.
Okay, 4 is lost.
We haven't got 13 voting members here.
Braden?
I've only got 12 votes.
We've only got
12.
11.
11.
Councillor Campbell's away and Evelyn is left.
We're at 12.
Evelyn's not. Oh,
Yeah, so instead of 15,
Yes, she is.
Does she go?
Great, we've got 13.
It's 13.
No.
13.
Yeah,
It's 13.
submission is lost.
Sorry,
Oh.
sorry.
We need to.
So could I have my vote recorded, please?
Yeah, so anyone who wants the votes noted, I think we'll do that. Yeah.
Could we please make it noted this is not a reflection on the staff?
Yeah.
Not at all.
Dollar each way.
I just like my vote recorded as well.
Yeah. Okay. I can understand both sides. For me as chair, I find it difficult to vote for something I know nothing about, and it's not the way I can do. Sorry. Yeah, and I appreciate other people's views as well. So, okay. No further items on this particular agenda. So that is the end of the extraordinary infrastructure meeting today. Thanks, everybody.
Move we go out of committee?
No, we're not
No,
on
we're
it.
not on committee.
Sorry.
Hey, I might have forgot the apologies.
No, not at all. Happy that we had a democratic process.
Yeah, Nigel, Aaron is now yours.
Did you stop it? Hey? Valentine's Day. It's the same matters that we were sympathetic of.
Right. Now you can end the streaming. Thank you.